Ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode, in honor of March Madness, we have our annual bracket showdown. And this time it involves brands of fishing line. So 8 of the top-selling brands will face off in a battle royale to see who is crowned our favorite overall fishing line brand. We also catch up with some Bassmaster and Major League Fishing news. The Indiana state record smallmouth is potentially broken, and we shine a spotlight on a charity fishing derby in honor of a very special 6-year-old and how you can help. All that and more on this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Welcome to the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. We truly have a jam-packed episode for you guys today. But first, we have to give a huge shout out to American Legacy Fishing. And by now, you guys know ALF is the first place that I check for fishing gear. It should be yours too. They have a price match guarantee. They have the best sales, the best customer service, fast shipping. But starting Wednesday, American Legacy Fishing is running a trade-a-thon in honor of the Bassmaster Classic. So everybody knows a lot of new gear comes out around the Bassmaster Classic, but that new gear obviously costs money, and one of the easiest ways to get the money for that new gear is to trade in your old gear to American Legacy Fishing. It's very simple. You go on the website, you click trade-ins at the top, then you fill out a really quick form to tell them what you have, and they send you back a quote. And if you think that quote looks good, you send them your gear, and they email you an e-gift card good for anything on the website. So it's really convenient. It's a simple process to get rid of the gear that you're not using and trade it in to American Legacy Fishing for the gear that you actually want. And right now, during the trade-a-thon that's going to start Wednesday, they're boosting all trades 10 to 20%. No questions asked, a boost across the board on your trade-in value starting Wednesday. And breaking news here, I just got it to my phone as I'm recording this. American Legacy Fishing just said, starting today, when you're listening to this episode, they're going to run a 40% rebate in the form of store credit for all Dobbins purchases now through March 25th. So right now, through March 25th, buy any Dobbins rod on the website over at AmericanLegacyFishing.com, and you get 40% of your purchase back on a gift card to use on the website. Again, that's going on now through March 25th. All of that and more you can find over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. As always, be sure to use code TACKLETALK10. We're here to save you money. Tackle Talk 10 saves you 10% off almost everything on the website that's regularly priced. Some exclusions apply, but not many. Almost everything on AmericanLegacyFishing.com is 10% off with code TACKLETALK10. All right, everybody. First thing here, we do have a lot to cover today, obviously being back from 2 straight weeks with a guest episode. The past 2 weeks were Ken Duke and Drew Gill, both of which I absolutely loved. I'm glad it sounds like you guys did too. Talk about information overload, right, on both of those episodes, but that means we're a little behind on the pro fishing scene here. So if you do care about pro fishing, you've probably already caught up on these, and if you don't care about pro fishing, well, you probably don't want me to spend a ton of time on these either. So either way, we just want to catch you up really quickly on the last few tournaments that have taken place. First, we had Stage 2 of the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour back a few weeks ago at Santee Cooper, and that was February 20th through 25th. And really quickly, your top 10 in reverse order: 10th place, Justin Lucas; 9th, James Watson; 8th, Cole Floyd; 7th place, Dave Lefebvre; 6th was Casey Ashley; 5th place, Dylan Hayes; 4th place, Matt Becker; 3rd, Jesse Wiggins; 2nd, Dean Rojas; and 1st place with the big win, stop me if you've heard this before, Jacob Wheeler. So yes, the domination continues. I believe this is Jacob's 7th Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour win, far and away your top angler since this circuit has been formed. It is truly mind-blowing to watch Jacob, derb after derb, just continue that level of success over and over again. So call me biased. Obviously, we've had Wheeler on the show a couple times. Happy to call Jacob a friend. And even with that bias, I don't think you can look someone in the eyes with a straight face and say Jacob Wheeler has not been the most most dominant angler on the planet, regardless of tournament circuit, over the past 4 or 5 plus years. So, as always, we're really happy for Jacob. Hopefully he gets that trophy shelf screwed into some studs because it's got to be getting heavy at this point. But a great stage 2, and now Major League Fishing is off to their premier tournament this week at Red Crest. And I think that's at Lay Lake in Birmingham, Alabama, March 14th through 17th. So if you're in or around the Birmingham area, the Red Crest Expo will be open, a lot of festivities, chances to meet your favorite anglers. It'll be a great time, and you can find more information on that over on MajorLeagueFishing.com. Okay, so that was Major League Fishing, and now, boy oh boy, it is time to recap the Bassmaster Elite Series at Lake Fork. And boys and girls, this was a total smackdown. They hit Fork at the perfect time. These big pre-spawn behemoths were just hitting the boat left and right. So first off, before we even get to the top 10, in the world of Bassmaster, you have like a maximum, obviously, of 5 fish a day, a maximum of 4 days if you make it through to the final round. So that's a maximum of 20 fish that these people can weigh in from start to finish. And in the Bassmaster world, if you break 100 pounds for those 20 fish, that is a monumental deal. They call that the century belt. It doesn't happen very often. It's happening a little bit more now as competition gets better, electronics get better, but 100 pounds still is the benchmark of all benchmarks. And yeah, you might have the winner break 100 pounds sometimes, maybe 1 or 2 others if it's a true slugfest. But folks, every single angler in the top 10 here at Lake Fork broke 100 pounds. And that is insane. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that this event on Lake Fork was one of the most historic tournaments maybe ever, certainly in a long time, and the weights were just eye-boggling when you watch them weigh in each day. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to jump to your top 10 here. 10th place, Cooper Gallant. 9th place, Kyle Patrick. 8th place, Ben Milliken. 7th, Wesley Gore. 6th place, Stetson Blaylock. 5th place, Justin Atkins. 4th place, Tyler Williams. 3rd place, Justin Hamner. 2nd, Tyler Rivette. And 1st place with 130 pounds and 15 ounces. Yes, you heard that right. 20 fish, 130 pounds and 15 ounces, an average of 6.5 pounds each fish is Elite Series rookie Trey McKinney. So, first off, congrats to Trey. Awesome performance. You could tell how nervous he was, I think, going into the final day with the lead. And to his credit, he never let off the gas. Ended up whipping these boys. It was 5+ pounds that I think he won by, which again, I don't know if you call it whipping. I guess that's probably not a great example because 2nd place, Tyler Rivette, still had 125 pounds, 9 ounces. So you have to be sick if you're someone like Tyler. If you catch 125 pounds and you lose a tournament, you should never lose a Bassmaster tournament with 125 pounds. But this really was a historic 4 days on Lake Fork. So the other glaring note here that I'll talk about really quickly is the top 10 is full of rookies and young guns. So you had 1st place, Trey McKinney, rookie. 2nd place, Tyler Rivette, 3rd or 4th year, I think, so he's definitely considered a young gun. 3rd place, Justin Hamner, again, probably in that 3 to 4 year range, young guy. 4th place, rookie, Tyler Williams. 5th place, Justin Atkins, 3rd year, I believe, on the Elite Series, still young. Stetson Blaylock in 6th place is really your only one that's been around a while, 7 years or so. 7th place, rookie, Wesley Gore. 8th place, rookie, Ben Milliken. 9th place, rookie, Kyle Patrick. 10th place, 2nd year, Cooper Gallant. So that is insane. 5 of the top 10 are rookies. Out of 103 anglers that participated in this, I think it was, there are only 10 rookies a year, and half of those rookies made the top 10. So the youth movement is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. You obviously have the perfect storm of some of the staple anglers getting older, the new wave anglers that fell in love with fishing through social media and YouTube, and these new forms of media are now coming to the age where they're either in college or they're graduating, and now they're making the Elite Series or the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour, and then you pair that up with the fact that these young guys are true grinders. In many cases, they're just flat out spending more time on the water each year than the veterans. You always talk about the vets like, in the off season, they love to go hunting and they love to take time off and do all this kind of stuff. A lot of these young guys are spending, 250, 300 days on the water a year. They're truly grinding and they're treating it as a job. And so I think that has a little bit to do with it. You also have the technological advances that everybody loves talking about over and over and over again. So we're not going to hit that right now, but they're really good at utilizing some of these technologies to their advantage that some of these other veterans are not quite as savvy with. And when you pair all of those together, you have this perfect recipe for the new age of anglers to be a real threat in these tournaments. So, I mean, shoot, look back at our last conversation that we had last week with Drew Gill on the Major League Fishing side. That was a peek into the mind of these young guys. And after sitting there, listening to that episode, being a part of that episode, obviously, and talking to Drew, it should be no surprise that those are the type of guys that are winning these events now. So hats off to Trey McKinney, the rest of the top 10 insane numbers they put up on Lake Fork at the Bassmaster Elite Series stop. The next stop for Bassmaster, obviously in about a week and a half from when you're listening to this, is going to be the Bassmaster Classic. All right, so that wraps up our pro fishing talk to start off the episode here. The next item of business we need to get to is we had a massive smallmouth that was caught in my neighboring state of Indiana that could and likely will topple a 32-year record for the Indiana state record smallmouth. So I have the article pulled up here. I have one from Outdoor Life, and it says, huge smallmouth bass caught in Indiana should break 32-year-old state record. And then the subtitle here says, if the reported weight of 8.23 pounds stands up to scrutiny, Rex Remington's bronzeback will break the long-standing record by nearly a pound. So the article here, super quick. It says, earlier this month, angler Rex Remington caught a smallmouth bass from Indiana's Monroe Lake that should break the existing state record by nearly a pound. Remington weighed the bronzeback on an official scale in front of officials with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, and it weighed 8.23 pounds, according to Wired to Fish and other sources. Remington then released the bass back into the lake. DNR staff is currently reviewing Remington's record application. Indiana DNR Public Information Officer Marty Benson told Outdoor Life that they're unable to share any details about this fish until it's officially certified as the new state record. This outcome seems likely as photographs shared to Facebook show that Remington's bass is a trophy caliber fish. For reference, the all-tackle world record smallmouth weighed nearly 12 pounds and was caught from Dale Hollow Lake in Tennessee. That record stood since 1955. Remington did not respond to requests for comment by the time of this publication. Remington also caught his pending state record bass from a body of water that's known more for kicking out big largemouth than giant smallies. Spanning roughly 10,000 acres, Monroe is the largest lake in Indiana. It's located roughly 65 miles south of Indianapolis. The current Indiana state record smallmouth weighs 7 pounds and 4 ounces and was caught by Dana Yoder from Twin Lake. Yoder's record has been on the books since 1992, and many Hoosiers thought it would never be broken. So there you go. That is a big smallmouth. 8.23 pounds for a smallmouth in the Midwest that was not caught from a Great Lake. In fact, the opposite. It was caught from a predominantly largemouth lake inland in Indiana. An awesome story. We'll keep you updated on this one if for some reason that it doesn't go through, but all sources seem to indicate that this fish will stand as the Indiana state record smallmouth. All right, folks, and last item of business here before we get to our bracket showdown is a little bit more of a serious note. So some of you might have already seen this on my Instagram story. Those of you that did, when I say blown away by your support, that is an understatement. But long story short here, one of my coworkers has a best friend that lives just outside of Columbus, Ohio. And their little boy last year lost his battle with a very aggressive form of brain cancer. And when he passed away, I think he was like 2 days away from his 7th birthday. So he was 6 years old at the time. And Jackson was ate up with bass fishing. And what his parents want to do is something really cool, I think. So they're putting on a charity fishing derby in May in Jackson's honor to raise money for cancer research. And right now, they're targeting May 4th, as long as the ODNR maintenance on that reservoir is done in time, which it should be. So in the beginning of May, they're going to have this really big community event and a fishing derby with kids and parents and everybody that can come out. They can celebrate Jackson and they can raise funds for a good cause in his name. And I think this is where Tackle Talk has a chance to come in. So I want to donate a ton of gear to these kids and their parents to enjoy this event, to raise money for cancer research. I've got my own money that I'm putting in, but I decided to open it up to you guys, to the listeners, in case you guys wanted to help out too. So I've personally right now got my Venmo open to take donations if you want to chip in. And then when we're done, I'm going to pool all the money together and we're going to go buy a ton of rods, reels, line, tackle boxes, baits, and gear for these kids to get them set up with their own fishing gear. And we've had some really, really, really generous donations from people already. So I want to shout you guys out really quick. Adam, William, Neil, John, Brandon, Ethan, Dante, Cade, Benjamin, Rob, Dallin, Bryce, Kevin, Ryan, Peyton, Alex, Justin, Cage, David, Parker, Matthew, Dwayne, Matt, Dustin, Natasha, Josh, John, Elliot, Stacy, Cheryl. You guys are all incredible, and we're just getting started here. So I want to be able to get these kids taken care of the right way with gear that will not only let them enjoy this date in Jackson's honor for a great cause, but will continue to let them fish, to give them this chance to get started with an activity that brings them a little closer to their families, gives kids times with their parents. Obviously, you guys know how it goes. When you get somebody invested in fishing and that kid loves fishing, the parents take them out fishing, it becomes a family thing, and then you get that precious time between like parents and children that unfortunately circumstances like Jackson's show us that's not always guaranteed. So I mean, I don't know what to say. I can't even imagine losing a child, let alone 6 years old. It breaks my heart. I think this is our chance as a show and as an industry and, you know, kind of this whole community that is fishing to help out. And we can honor Jackson. We can raise money for a great cause in hopes that someday no family has to go through this. So right now, if you want to donate, my Venmo is at AHAZE13. A Haze 13, but the Haze is HAZE. So AHAZE13. And if it asks for the last four of my phone number to confirm or whatever it does on Venmo, the old phone number that I used for this account was 0241. So if you use that 0241 to confirm it over at AHAZE13, that should let you donate. And I don't like asking you guys for things. You guys know that. That's not what we do on this show. But if you feel inclined to be a part of what we're going to do for this on behalf of Tackle Talk, on behalf of our listeners, they are going to know this is not from me. This is from all of us. So it's a really cool chance for us to kind of make an impact here. Feel free. It's AHAZE13 on Venmo. Last four digits, if it asks for it, are 0241. And I'll take a ton of pictures. I'll send them back to you all so you can see what you were able to be a part of when this event actually happens. And it's just things like this that I think give us a chance to show what the fishing community is all about. Okay, so deep breath here. Let's get back into the episode, and we're going to get to what you all came here for, which is the annual March Madness Bracket Showdown. And we will get to that showdown in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium Batteries. And one look at my Dakota Lithium batteries, and you will see very quickly why they are my number one choice for batteries. My batteries are not new. They're not shiny. My batteries don't sit inside a really nice boat compartment for their whole life. These batteries are constantly being moved from my garage to my truck to my kayak where they're exposed to the elements all day, back to the truck, back to the garage, sometimes multiple times a day. And they're dirty, they're scratched, they're well-loved, but they take the abuse in stride. I don't buy batteries to sit there and look pretty. I buy them to perform in the toughest conditions that I can put them through. And Dakota Lithiums do just that. So right now you can go over to the website and pick up your own Dakota Lithium batteries, and you don't even have to pay full price. That's because here at Tackle Talk, we're all about saving you money, and you get an exclusive coupon code that saves you 10% off your entire purchase every single time. And that code is Tackle Talk 10. So use code TACKLETALK10, TACKLETALK10 for 10% off your next battery over at www.dakotalithium.com, the official lithium battery of Bassmaster. All right, now let's get back to our bracket showdown here. The rules here are very simple. It's just like the NCAA tournament or any other single elimination bracket. I have chosen a number of contestants, in this case 8, that will be placed on a two-sided loser goes home, winner moves on style bracket, where today we're comparing brands of fishing line. So what I've done is I've taken 8 of the best-selling brands of fishing line in the world, and we've randomly drawn out of a hat to match them up against who they're going to go up against in the first first round. That way, there's no seeding, there's no planning on my part on how the bracket will be constructed, because if we did seeds, I've talked about this before, it's my opinion. So if I seed them based off of, seeds 1 through 8, that kind of gives away who the favorites are, who's going to win certain matchups and stuff like that. So we don't do that. Instead, in the past, we've gone off of sales numbers. I don't know how to look up sales numbers of individual brands. So instead, we did a random drawing here out of a hat to give you the order of the March Madness bracket style showdown here. So in your 2024 March Madness bracket showdown of 8 brands of fishing line, the first matchup in the top left of the bracket is going to be Berkley versus Stren. The second matchup, bottom left, is going to be Seagar versus Daiwa. The third matchup, top right of the bracket, is P-Line versus Sunline. And then the bottom right of the bracket, our last first round matchup, is Suffix versus Power Pro. So actually, the random hat here made an awesome bracket because you have some really good matchups of what I feel like are competitors that are very similar. So you get one of those knocked out right off the bat, which I really like. I don't know if I could have drawn this up any better. I would say there's probably one tiny switch that maybe I'll mention here in a little bit that I might have made if I would have made this bracket, but really that's about it. So we're going to roll with this. You've got Berkley versus Stren, Seagar versus Daiwa, P-Line versus Sunline, and Suffix versus Power Pro, which are going to be your 4 first-round matchups. So let's get into the first matchup here. We have Berkley versus Stren. 2 different brands of fishing line that are ironically owned by the same parent company. So Pure Fishing, who owns Abu Garcia, they own Fenwick, they own Ugly Stick, Mitchell, Spider Wire, who else? Obviously predominantly Berkley, but then this company purchased Stren back in, I believe, 2004. So that was, 20 years ago, and since then they've been under the same parent company of Pure Fishing. But that doesn't mean that they're even remotely the same fishing line. So let's start with Berkley here. The first line from Berkley that I think of, and I think a lot of people think of, and I think it was the very first one they made, was Trilene. And I believe that was introduced, Berkley Bedell was the guy's name, back in late 1950s, probably 1959, 1960. Let's see here. Yeah, I just looked it up. 1959. So 1959 is when Trilene was actually introduced into the fishing world, so it's been around for over 60 years. And when you think of Berkley Trilene, I think you probably think of monofilament. And that's obviously what Berkley Bedell came out with way back in the day. You can see that red box that they still have today, Trilene XL Smooth Casting. That is classic Trilene mono. So then Berkley Trilene, over the years kind of adapted. Now Berkley Trilene has fluorocarbon options too. They've got the 100% fluorocarbon that's in the gold box. That's a popular choice these days. But Berkley also has evolved into much more than just Trilene. So they've got the Berkley Fire line, which they categorize as like a super line, even though it's just basically like a really thin braid alternative. They've got Berkley Vanish, which is also 100% fluorocarbon, but at a cheaper price point. They have Flora Shield, which is like a copolymer line, I believe. They've got Berkley X9 and X5 braids. They've got Trilene Big Game. They have Ice Line. So Berkley has expanded that lineup quite a bit over the years. But to be honest, the majority of those lines do not make it into my everyday lineup. And again, we're honest here. That's the fun part about this show is we can say what we like and what we don't like. I think there are brands in Berkley's line that are okay. I think there are ones that I don't use too much or don't really care for. And then I think there are 1 or 2 that I really do not like. So the lines from Berkley that I will use from time to time, I have used Fireline, in the creeks and stuff for ultralight stuff on spinning rods. I don't use it, again, a ton, but I have used it. It has made its way onto my reels over the past couple years here and there. I do have a soft spot for Trilene Big Game Mono. And Big Game is great for just like cheap backing for your reels if you need it, but it's also great in high diameters for like big baits. So if I have to pick like a big, thick monofilament, Big Game is near at the top of my list in terms of big, thick monos that I could use for certain things. Then there's some other ones I don't really care about one way or the other. Regular Trilene, 100% fluorocarbon Trilene, X5, X9 braids, all of that stuff. It's okay, but my least favorite Berkley line by far is Berkley Vanish fluorocarbon. I hate it. and it's definitely one of my least favorite lines on the market in general. Bad memory, low abrasion resistance compared to many other lines of similar pound test. Now, the one thing you have going for you with it, obviously, is that it's inexpensive compared to other fluorocarbons, but my number one rule with fluorocarbon is you get what you pay for, way more so than monofilament or braid. So that's Berkeley lines in a nutshell. I don't have any big favorites here except for big game mono that I do have a soft spot for like heavier line techniques or cheap backing. And then we move over to Stren. And Stren, ironically, also came out in 1959 by DuPont, I believe, at the time. And so now, ironically, these are owned by the same parent company after competing for, decades and decades with each other and coming out in the exact same year. But Berkeley took the route of branching out into all these different types of line and trying to be something for everybody. Meanwhile, Stren, for the most part, stuck with monofilament. Yes, they have whatever they call it, fluorocast, which I think is actual fluorocarbon versus a copolymer, but still heavy majority of Stren lines are monofilament. So the good old purple box Stren is their bread and butter for sure. And Stren is a really good example, to me anyway, of a company that did something and did it really well and stuck with it. And Stren is probably my overall favorite monofilament for everyday techniques. Most of my top water rods, right, when I take my winter line off my jerkbait setup and then I put monofilament on them for summer, I rip the fluoro off and I usually put Stren mono on my rods for the summer when I'm actually just going to use it for a top water rod. Also, if I ever need really light mono for like trout fishing or something, I go with like 4-pound purple box Stren mono. So what Stren lacks in variety, I think it makes up for with very good, very affordable, do everything monofilament that casts great. It's strong. You get good knot strength, good abrasion resistance. It's just an all-around great mono. So this first round matchup for me, yes, they're owned by the same parent company. No, neither of them are my go-to lines every day. But when the situation calls for it, there are times where I'm going to reach for purple box Stren, and I can't really say that about many Berkeley lines. So I'm going to give the first round matchup here to Stren. All right, the next matchup we have here is going to be a big one. It's Seaguar versus Daiwa. And now, I'm not going to give all the history of all of these lines, but I felt like it was at least worth a mention in the last matchup because they are such old legacy lines and some of the first to come on the market back in the day. But we have plenty of more modern brands and companies on this list, and two of them we've got in this matchup, Seaguar versus Daiwa. So let's start with Seaguar. I think Seaguar technically started back in the early 70s, but that was way over in Tokyo, Japan. I don't think that was over here yet. I could be wrong. I also could be wrong, but I think Seaguar has the claim to the very first fluorocarbon line. Again, not looking this up or anything, I just think that I've read that somewhere that Seaguar was the first to make pure fluorocarbon. But regardless, Seaguar is one of the top dogs in the fishing line game today, and for good reason. They have a great lineup of tournament-ready, premium fishing lines that cover almost all of your bases that you could need from a single brand. So a couple of their more popular ones on the braid side, they have Seaguar Smackdown, and then they have their less expensive version that I think is Tact X. Then on the mono side, you don't see it very often, but they do have a mono called Senshi, I think is what it's called, Senshi. I think that's pronounced Senshi, but it's pretty expensive mono, and there are much better options out there that are a more cost-effective price point. But Seaguar's bread and butter is fluorocarbon. And the three most popular higher-end Seaguar fluorocarbons are Tatsu, Invisex, and Abrazex. Tatsu is like $42 a box or something. Very, very expensive fluorocarbon. Abrazex is probably in the $25 to $35 range, depending on pound test. Then you've got Invisex, which is about the same, maybe a buck or two cheaper for the same diameter line as Abrazex. But then you have Gold Label, which is about $20, Red Label about $15 to $16, and then you've got Basics, which is about $10. So you have almost every price point that you can imagine captured between those 6 or 7 different lines of fluorocarbon, which is really nice. And it's a great thing about Seaguar. They really do make something for everybody in terms of what your budget is. Now, here's my 2 cents on Seaguar fluorocarbon. I love Invisex. It is one of my top 2 or 3 lines for sure, but I only use it for moving baits for the most part. So Invisex to me has a little bit more stretch than most of the other fluorocarbons that I normally use. So it's really good for certain situations, and I would say it's not my favorite in others. So for bottom contact baits like jigs, Texas rigs, Carolina rigs, whatever. I do prefer other lines. But for jerk baits, crankbaits, chatterbaits, spinner baits, InvizX is a great line for those moving baits. And then to me, Tatsu is very nice, obviously, but it's not worth the money in my opinion. Basics, the $10 version is okay. Again, you get what you pay for. I'd put it above Berkley Vanish for sure. It is nice if you're on a tight budget. AbrazeX is decent. I've never really used Gold Label, to be honest, so I don't have an opinion really on that one. But there is one line on this list that I hate, and it's ironically one of their best sellers. It's Seaguar Red Label. I hate Red Label, and I know that's going to be an unpopular opinion with some people. A lot of people love Red Label. I would rather not go fishing at all than go fishing with Red Label. I've had more bad experiences with Red Label than any other fishing line in my life, and maybe I just kept getting bad spools, I don't know, but I had the worst knot strength that I've ever had in my life with Seaguar Red Label. And I can even think back to a specific day where all of this came to a culmination and I realized I would never buy another box of Red Label again. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago now. I was creek fishing for like 1 to 2 pound smallmouth, shin deep water, not exactly trophy hunting by any means. And I broke off 4 fish in a row on Red Label. 3 of those 4 broke off at the knot, and 1 of them broke off just in the middle of the line. And you can say, but Andrew, that's probably your fault. Bad knots. If they break 3 out of 4 times at the knot, that's probably user error. I can assure you it was not bad knots. I'm not great at a lot of things. I'm pretty good at tying knots. I know what I'm doing there. I was not burning the line. They were lubricated. They were clean knots from start to finish that were failing me fish after fish. And that wasn't the only day that I had issues with it. So after weeks and weeks of using this line and getting frustrated with it, I just put it away for about a year. And then one summer day, I brought it back out and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to give this another go. Maybe I just wasn't as good back then as I thought I was. I'm going to break it back out and I'm going to give Red Label another try. And about halfway through the day, on like a summer day, when I was out there throwing, I think it was a chatterbait, and it just went phew. You see this chatterbait just go into oblivion, and it felt like it casted 100 miles away from me. The line broke, and it's just sailing off into the stratosphere. And that was the last day I ever used Red Label, and I will never use Red Label again. So take that for what you will. I love InvizX. I like AbrazeX. I do not like Red Label. And then on the other side of this matchup, it's paired up with Daiwa. And Daiwa has 2 big lines that stick out for me, and they're the Daiwa J-Braid and the Daiwa Samurai. Daiwa J-Braid is, of course, braided fishing line. It comes in a few different iterations. They have J-Braid 4-strand, J-Braid 8-strand, and then they have J-Braid Grand 8, which is their like higher end version. I can do without the 4, but the Daiwa 8-strand and the Daiwa 8 Grand are both great lines, especially the Grand. It's really smooth, which is probably my favorite thing about this line in general. There are going to be other braids on this list that I really like, and I think there are 2 that are pretty comparable, but Daiwa J-Braid is smoother, I think, out of the guides than any other brand. My buddy Jeff is the one that got me into Daiwa J-Braid, and he's on that kick. He loves J-Braid. And now J-Braid is one of the brands that I rotate through on my spinning rods from time to time. It has become my go-to line for musky braid. So because it's so smooth, I've used the 80-pound, the 8-strand for musky is great over the past 2 seasons. Really like it. I know 80 might be a little overkill. You could probably go with 65, but I like that 80-pound, and it's just a 20-pound mono equivalent in terms of the diameter, but I haven't really had a reason to change it yet. So overall, the pure braid rankings, I would probably put J-Braid as a whole maybe 2 or 3 out of all the other braids on the market combined. They're definitely up there for sure. The Samurai Fluoro that they have from Daiwa, I can take or leave. It's good for sure, but just like Tatsu, it's very expensive. I think a 220-yard box that's 20-pound is like $42. Now, to be fair, 220 yards is a little bit bigger spool than you're going to get with some other fluoros that are on this list that'll give you like 165 to 200 yards per spool, but 220 for $42 is still a very expensive fluorocarbon. So overall, is it good? Yes, but very similar to Seaguar Tatsu that we talked about a second ago. I just don't think it's worth the price for me when there are other alternatives that I like more. So overall, I'm going to give this matchup to Seaguar. Seaguar has the bigger selection, and when it really comes down to it of which of the lines that I actually use that I like more, Seaguar InvizX or Daiwa J-Braid, Seaguar InvizX is one of the 2 fluoros that I use very, very often, and Daiwa J-Braid is probably one of 4 braids that I use from time to time. So Seaguar wins this one for me. All right, everybody, we'll get back to the episode in just a second, but first, we are brought to you in part by Mossy Oak. Mossy Oak and Mossy Oak Fishing have a huge variety of shirts, pants, sweatshirts, hoodies, outerwear to help you make the most of your time out there on the water. So I told you last week, the Mossy Oak fishing hoodies that are on the website right now are currently my favorite hoodie that I own, but warm weather is right around the corner, and that means it's time to start thinking about their long sleeve tech shirts. And I think the key to these shirts is what Mossy Oak calls their Hydroplex. Basically, it's a material that keeps you cool, and then it absorbs the sweat or whatever moisture is on your skin, and then it pushes that moisture to the outside of the material so that it dries quicker. And then you pair that with the UPF sun protection, lightweight construction, and you have the recipe for the perfect shirt for spring and summer as these temperatures finally start to rise. So check out their full line of the Mossy Oak fishing tech shirts and all the other apparel they have over on the website. The tech shirts right now, the long sleeves are 50% off. They're starting at $17.99. And then the Mossy Oak long sleeve tech hoodies are 40% off, starting at $26.99. So head over to www.store.mossyoak.com, and then at the top, click fishing. Again, that's www.store.mossyoak.com, click fishing. All right, the next matchup here we have is P-line versus Sunline. And this one for me is going to be pretty easy, but we're going to break it down anyway, obviously. P-line, predominantly to me, is a fluorocarbon and a copolymer line company. Yes, they have a braid, and it's the Zero Fade Endurex braid that they have, but I don't know anybody that throws P-line braid at all. I've never met one in the wild, somebody who goes, you know what my favorite braid is? P-line. I've never met that person. I'm sure they're out there because they're still in business and they're still selling braid, but I have never met this person yet. Everybody who I know that throws P-line is usually throwing fluorocarbon or copolymer. So of the three main lines that P-line is probably known for, you've got P-line FluoroClear, you've got P-line Fluorocarbon, and you've got P-line Tactical Fluorocarbon. And the first thing to remember here that I see a lot of people get wrong, especially when you're first starting out in fishing, it's really easy to get tricked. P-line FluoroClear is not fluorocarbon. I know it has the word fluoro in the name, but I will repeat, P-line FluoroClear is not fluorocarbon. It says right on the box, fluorocarbon coated. And that is a fancy way of saying copolymer. So it's a mix of lines. It's not pure fluorocarbon. Some people love copolymers for certain things, better invisibility than mono, better casting and less memory than fluoro. It's a happy medium for some people, but there are other things like FluoroClear floats easier than regular fluorocarbon. Regular fluorocarbon sinks easier even with the surface tension of the water not being broken, where FluoroClear kind of needs that surface tension of the water to be broken to start that very, 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 very slight sinking that you see with like some monos and stuff too. So for all intents and purposes, FluoroClear acts a lot more like a very nice monofilament than it does a fluorocarbon. I think that's a really good way to look at it. It has some of the qualities of fluorocarbon, decreased visibility, some are going to say improved knot strength, but again, it's not fluorocarbon. It will stretch more than fluorocarbon will. So just to be clear, FluoroClear is not fluorocarbon. It's not my thing. Regular P-line fluorocarbon is okay. I would put that closer to like Trilene 100% fluorocarbon, and then Tactical Fluorocarbon from P-line is a legitimate contender on the fluoro market. Same guy that I talked about earlier, Jeff, who loves J-Braid, also loves P-line fluorocarbon, but it's the Tactical Fluorocarbon. But for me, my tiny gripe with P-line Tactical and P-line in general is that it's a little thicker than a lot of the other fluorocarbons on the market for that particular pound test. So if you match up 20-pound, Seaguar Invisex and 20-pound Tactical Fluorocarbon from P-line, Invisex is going to be thinner. So you get the same pound test, but for P-line, it's a thicker line. So for that, it kind of gets a knock from me. But overall, P-line is not bad. It's good fishing line. There are a lot of people that like it. I think a lot of people probably started throwing P-line because of Scott Martin. Scott Martin was a really influential person, I think, to put P-line on the map a little bit, especially for more modern anglers. But overall, P-line, good braid. The problem is it's facing off against its competitor in Sunline. And to start off, Sunline has a ton of options. So for mono, they've got Sunline Supernatural. They have the nylon leader. I can't remember what they call that one. But then they have a Sokamaki, which is a really cheap monofilament that's made specifically for backing your reels. And then on the braid side, they have Siglon PE X4, Siglon PE X8. They've got the Siglon PE AMZ, which is their top 8-strand braid. And then they have SX1, which is an all-around braid. They have FX2, which is for frogging and flipping. And then if you go over to fluorocarbon, they have their main fluorocarbon lines, which are Assassin, which is the cheaper of the three. You've got FC Sniper, which is the middle ground. And then they have Shooter, which is their high end. I think Assassin usually runs in the low $20 range per spool. You've got FC Sniper that's like mid-20s. And then you've got Shooter, which is up into that $40 price range. Again, same thing with like Tatsu and Samurai. So here's my advice here with Sunline. Just buy FC Sniper and forget about it. FC Sniper, I think, dollar for dollar, pound for pound, is the best fluorocarbon on the market. Value, quality, memory, strength, knot integrity. Sunline Sniper is probably my all-around favorite fluorocarbon. It doesn't have much give to it, it's tough as nails, and it's pleasant to work with where some other fluorocarbons aren't. So overall, it is a killer line that I have almost zero qualms about. So I think that's probably where Sunline shines for me. I don't think Shooter is necessary or worth the money. Again, it ends up in that Daiwa Samurai, Seaguar Tatsu type lane for me. I would use Assassin if I was trying to save a few bucks, but at that rate, again, it's kind of like just make the step up to FC Sniper. If you're going to pay for Assassin, just pay for Sniper. It's kind of like when people ask, it's like, oh, should I get a $99 rod or a $129 rod? Well, if the $129 rod is that much better, just bump up and get the $129 rod. You're already spending $100. So it's the same thing here, I think, with FC Sniper with Sunline. Now on the braid side, recently, I've really started to like SX1 from Sunline. It's their regular middle-of-the-road braid. I started using it on my spinning rods this year, and it has become my number one go-to braid at the moment. Now, it's definitely a little bit more expensive than some of the other braids that we're going to talk about in this group, so I should put that in perspective. I think it's like $21 for 125 yards, but it is a darn good braid. So as much as I like SX1, though, I don't like one of what I think is their newer braids, and it's called X-Plasma Assegai. I butchered it, I know, but it's X-Plasma ASEGAI. And I bought a box of this about probably 4 or 5 months ago, spooled it up, was really excited about it, and I did not like it at all. I love SX1, did not like the X-Plasma. The X-Plasma is a little too slick for me. It's got this coating on it that's a little weird, and I had some problem with knot strength. So of those, I bought one spool of the X-Plasma. I'll never buy it again, and I definitely will be rebuying the SX1 braid from Sunline. So one good, one bad braid in my eyes, but overall, I'm going to give this matchup between P-Line and Sunline to Sunline. Hands down, the better, more well-rounded line brand with better offerings across the spectrum. All right, and finally here, our last matchup of the first round, we have Power Pro versus Suffix. And this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the battle of the braids, because we have two very popular braided lines here. And if we start with Power Pro, I think we're all familiar with Power Pro by now. They're the standard braided fishing line. They're probably the best-selling braided line of all time, would be my guess. It's very cost-effective, a great variety of colors and high-vis braids, or you can go to the deep moss green braids that everybody loves. They've got the new Super 8 Slick V2 braid, which is their higher-end version, and then just the regular old green box Power Pro, which is a staple in the fishing industry. And I have probably had, over the years, more time out on the water cumulatively throwing Power Pro than any other braid. You get it at Walmart, you get it at your local stores. You know, when you were a little bit younger, it was like the thing that was available, and that was the braid that we learned to love braid with. So the only problem with Power Pro in my eyes is it does lack durability, both in terms of color and the line itself. So you're going to have problems with line fade. That's just a thing with Power Pro. It's not going to stay that same color for long. Your greens are going to fade pretty quick. But the more important thing when we talk about durability is abrasion resistance. And I think I've probably had more problems with Power Pro fraying than any other braided line that I use. And it's part of it could just be that I throw it more, so I'm a little bit more nitpicky on it. I've had more chances for things to go wrong with it, but especially in that 8 to 10 pound range, I have had a lot of issues with line fray. Now, if you go up pound tests, 30, 40, 50, 65, you don't have those problems as much. But then on the higher end, those higher, 30, 40, 50, 65 pound braids, I don't think it casts as well as some of its counterparts in the braid world. I think SX1 casts better. I think J-Braid casts better. And both of those lines are a little bit more abrasion resistance, but they're also more expensive. So Power Pro, in my eyes, serves a purpose, and it's a good option at an affordable price, and Power Pro has been doing it for years. Now, on the other side, Power Pro matches up with Suffix. And I don't care too much for Suffix Mono. I would rather have Stren, to be honest. But what Suffix does really well is braid. Suffix 832 is great. They also have a really expensive version called 131G Core. It's supposed to be something crazy like 13 strand braid or something nuts. We don't need all that. Regular Suffix 832 is good braided fishing line in that $16-ish price range. So a little bit more expensive than Power Pro, a little bit less than Sunline SX1, and kind of right in that Daiwa J-Braid price point. And I think Daiwa J-Braid is smoother, but I think Suffix is tougher. So take that for what you will. It depends on what you're looking for out of your braid. Strength versus smoothness. And not to say that J-Braid isn't strong, it's not to say that Suffix isn't smooth, but comparing the two, I think J-Braid comes off the reel and through the guides a little cleaner than Suffix does. Suffix is a little bit noisier and it has a little bit more texture to the braid itself. And up until I switched over some of my spinning rods to SX1 this year, I was using Suffix 832 a lot. My river rods had 10-pound 832 on it for the most part, and again, good braid, good value, strong, a little less smooth, a little more noisy, and a little bit more textured. So in this matchup here, we have Power Pro versus Suffix, and I'm going to have to give the nod here to Suffix. So Suffix moves on, and that sets up our semifinal matchups here. On the left side of the bracket now, we have Stren versus Seagar, and on the right side, we have Sunline versus Suffix. So as usual, the semifinal and the final rounds are going to go pretty quick here because we've discussed all of these brands and these competitors at length here. But for Seagar versus Stren, again, you have one brand in Stren that does one thing really well, and it's one thing that we don't use a lot anymore, which is monofilament. It has its time and its place, but it's definitely not a huge player in my lineup anymore compared to what it used to be when I was younger. And then you have Seagar, which has a wider product offering, and it has some offerings that I really like Invisex, and some other offerings that I really, really don't like Red Label. But overall, I think the good outweighs the bad, so I'm going to go with Seagar here over Stren, and Seagar moves on to the finals. Now, on the other side here, it's a little tougher. You've got Sunline, who has a huge product line, the majority of which don't really apply to me, but some of them are very good all-purpose lines. You have a really good fluorocarbon in FC Sniper, and then an up-and-coming favorite with SX1. And that faces off against Suffix and their flagship braid 832, which has been on my rods for years. It's a great value braid, and I tend to think that I like that a lot more than Power Pro these days. So Sunline is pricier, Suffix is a little bit more of a one-trick pony with braid, so I'm going to give the nod here to Sunline, which means that sets up our final round, which is Seagar versus Sunline. And I think when you look at this bracket and all 8 of the starting competitors, I think this is the clear correct matchup for your finals. I would say these are the 2 best fluorocarbon brands on the market and 2 sneaky braid competitors with Seagar Smackdown and Sunline SX1. However, to me, I think Sunline wins both of those categories. If I had to choose one, I'm choosing Sunline Sniper over Seagar Invisex in most situations, and I'm picking Sunline SX1 over Seagar Smackdown. So your winner of this year's 2024 March Madness bracket of our favorite overall fishing line is Sunline. Now, I'm sure some of you agree, many of you probably don't agree. That's the fun part about fishing and fishing gear. There is rarely a 100% objective right answer. So much of the fishing world is subjective, and it really is just a matter of putting the time in and figuring out what's right for you. So there's a reason that all 8 of these brands are still on the shelves today, because there are people that absolutely love all 8 of these brands. All right, we'll get back to the episode in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by RTIC Coolers. No matter whether you're hunting, fishing, fishing, hiking, camping, whether you're going solo or with a crowd, you deserve a cooler that is as tough and as adventurous as you are. And that's where RTIC comes in. RTIC makes the best hard coolers, soft coolers, and drinkware designed to stand up to the harsh situations that we frequently put them through. And they do it at half the price of the other guys. So the only 4 letters you need on the front of your cooler are RTIC. And right now, they've got their spring sale going on where you can go over to the website. You can save up to 40% off their signature tumblers and their travel mugs. You can literally get a 20-ounce Arctic tumbler for like $8.39 right now, so under $9. Meanwhile, the other guys charge $30 to $40 each. They also have 15% off backpack coolers. They've got 40% off insulated water bottles, all kinds of stuff over at www.rticoutdoors.com. Click the spring sale on the homepage. Again, that's www.rticoutdoors.com. Keep the adventure going with RTIC. All right, everybody, and before we head out today, I know we've had a long episode, but I do want to get to a mailbag question here, powered by Dakota Lithium.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast Mailbag, powered by Dakota Lithium Batteries. Adventure awaits at dakotalithium.com.
All right, this mailbag question here is from Chris, and he says, "Hey there, I'm a new listener, and I need your help. I'm Chris, 38, from Iowa. I've only been listening to your podcast for a month or two, and I really enjoy it. I work nights 4 to 5 days a week, and that's usually when I put on Tackle Talk. I was hoping to get some suggestions and some tips mainly on rods and reels that I use. A little backstory to help you with the suggestions, I guess you could say I'm a beginner fisherman. Growing up, I always went with my dad, who has probably at least 40 years fishing experience and counting, but mostly it was just to travel and be outdoors, occasionally throwing a line in the water, but never really pursued it. However, in the past couple years or so, my interest in fishing came out of nowhere. I've always been used to a spinning reel, and recently I tried learning a bait caster, but I'm not really sure if it's for me. Fishing in the Midwest can be a challenge as the weather is constantly changing, and the furthest that I've fished away is Lake Okoboji in Iowa, which is about 3.5 hours from me. I'm Sioux City, Iowa, which is minutes from Nebraska and South Dakota. I don't fish for any species in particular, although I do like eating some walleye, northern, and catfish. By the way, I have a classic 100 catch pelican kayak, and I also like to fish from the bank. I have a variety of baits, even some homemade ones, but I won't list those. I'm a longtime musician, so I try to pursue my creativity in the fishing world. Once the time is right, my dad and I plan to fish at this Buckskin Hills Lake place in Hooker, Nebraska, and I'm trying to intake as much information as I can so that I can catch more than 2 fish like I did last year locally. Also, if you have any suggestions on late evening or night fishing. I don't think I'd get much luck after work when I get off at 2 in the morning, but you never know. Here's a list of my rods and reels if you could match the best everything rod reel for what I have, or I wouldn't mind buying something if I need to. Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. Here's my gear. A 4-foot 8-inch ultralight ugly stick. I have a 5.6 Independence rod. It's an unknown model, and it's vintage, and it feels like a medium light. I have a 6-foot medium heavy Berkeley lightning rod. I have a 6-foot medium heavy Elite ugly stick, and a 7-foot medium light Fenwick Eagle. And then he listed the model numbers of each of those rods. And then the very last thing here says, I also have a Pfluger President spinning reel, an Abu Garcia Max Pro 20 spinning reel, a Daiwa CC 80 bait caster, Abu Garcia Easy Cast bait caster, and a Piscifun Blade SC spin cast reel. Okay, so I know that was a lot there, a long mailbag question, but that's why I wanted to do one today instead of a couple. We're going to do a full mailbag episode here pretty soon. So thank you, Chris, for the message. I appreciate it. As far as questions go in here, it sounds like you have probably 3 specific ones. One, you asked and you said you're not sure if a bait caster is right for you and wanting some info on that. 2, night fishing tips. And then the third thing I heard, obviously, was your rods and reels and matching those up correctly, or what I would do. So let's start with the first one. You said you've always used a spinning reel and is a bait caster for you. Well, you said you like multi-species stuff, and it's not just bass. You said you catch walleye, catfish, things like that. If you truly are a multi-species guy and you're not going to get super hardcore into bass fishing specifically, there is a world where you don't need a bait caster and you can do everything that you need to do with spinning reels and spin cast reels. So a lot of times on this show, we talk about kind of mid to high level bass fishing. So in those cases, yes, usually bait casters are a necessity. When you talk about frogging, flipping, cranking, there are certain situations that you need a bait caster. But if you're just getting back into it, if you love multi-species fishing, if you mostly fish finesse techniques or things that can be thrown on spinning rods, I'm definitely not here to shove bait casters down your throat. So that would be my first caveat here, is I guarantee there are plenty of people listening to this show who do not use, who do not even own bait casters. And that's cool. Not everybody is Kevin Van Dam. Not everybody is bass tournament fishing on the weekends. Some people just absolutely love to go to a local lake, throw a grub or a beetle spin or a Meps or a wacky rig or a Ned rig or whatever around and wear out any fish that bites. And that's totally okay with me. Now, if you're getting really serious into the bass fishing game and you truly want to master a lot of these techniques that come along with hardcore bass fishing, then yes, I would make an attempt to get proficient with a bait caster at some point as you go along. Now, the second question here was about night fishing, and we actually did a full episode on night fishing a few years back, and I think all of that info still holds true. It was back on December 14th, 2021, and it's simply titled Tips for Night Fishing. So if you go back to that episode, you'll hear me talk a lot about vibration being a key in nighttime bass fishing, since bass at the end of the day are visual creatures. The degree of importance of that visibility is still probably up for debate a little bit, but there's no doubt that bass do rely on sight to feed. So at night, that sense is hindered, and that means you have to rely on other senses like vibration, sound, those being two big ones. I'm sure that scent plays a little bit of factor in there too. So for me, it's like a big, dark Colorado blade spinnerbait, chatterbaits, things that make it a little easier to notice, to triangulate where that thing is, to pursue it, and ultimately to eat that bait in the dark. So a lot of my big successes in night fishing have always been reaction strike based. And then the last one here, you ask about your current arsenal. So you list the 5 rods and the 5 reels that you have, and if it was up to me, I'd probably pair them like this. I would go your 4'8" ultralight ugly stick, that's your panfish rod. And so for that, I would probably put, if it'll fit on the reel seat, that Piscifun spin cast reel on that rod, because that's probably your setup where the reel is the least important. The next, I would probably go 7-foot medium light Fenwick Eagle is the spinning rod that you had, and I would make that your all-around spinning setup. So you can use that for bass, you can use that for walleye. That's a great little setup, and I would probably put the Pflueger President on that rod so that you have a great all-around spinning setup. The next, you have a 6-foot medium-heavy Berkeley lightning rod. If I'm reading that model number right, I think that's a casting rod, which means if that's the case, I'd probably put your Daiwa CC80 on that, the bait caster that you have, and then that is your all-around casting setup. So it's a little bit shorter than a lot of people would use, but 6-foot medium-heavy, you'll still be able to do almost everything you need to do: chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, buzzbaits, Texas rigs, flipping jigs, all that kind of stuff. You just got a little bit shorter rod, they'll still handle it fine. It's just not going to be a lot of people's first choice. A lot of people are going to want a little bit longer rod for those techniques, but the 6-foot will do. And then next to last, you have the 6-foot medium heavy ugly stick spinning rod. I'd probably put your Abu Garcia Max Pro spinning reel on that, and then you have a nice little spinning setup that's a little bit more heavy duty because it's a medium heavy, and you can use that for those other applications that you're not quite proficient with a bait caster yet, those heavier bass lures, while you learn a bait caster. And then finally, you have that 5.6 vintage rod. I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about that rod, so I don't feel really comfortable recommending what to do with that. But for now, you can put that off to the side. You have a backup bait caster, the Abu Garcia Easy Cast that you have. You can also use that as a backup. Or if you find it easier to learn on that Abu Garcia Easy Cast, put that on your casting rod and learn to use a bait caster that way. You can do that too. So you can swap that Abu Garcia and that Daiwa in and out as you need. So that's probably what I would do with your rods, and I hope that helps. All right, everybody, so there you go. That is our episode today. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, feel free to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to donate to Jackson's Fishing Derby, the Venmo is currently open. It's at AHAZE13. The confirmation code is 0241. I appreciate all of you a ton. We have some really cool stuff in the works heading your way soon. Shoot us an email, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on the web, tackletalkpodcast.com, and we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2021. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.